Mother tries to fix relationship with estranged daughter. What she discovers about herself leaves everyone in tears. Hello, welcome. Leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications, and enjoy this story. Imagine the overwhelming pain of watching someone you love slip away, not because of distance, but because of a wound so deep, words alone could never heal it. Sarah thought she had lost her daughter Emily forever, the silence between them growing like a chasm too wide to bridge. But when Sarah makes one final, desperate attempt to reconnect, she has no idea that this journey will not only test the limits of her love, but also unravel a truth about herself that she was never prepared to face. As the layers of their strained relationship are peeled back, Sarah is forced to confront the haunting reality of her own choices and the irreversible impact they had on Emily's life. What she discovers will shake her to the core and leave you questioning. What would you sacrifice to heal the bond with someone you love? This is a story of love, regret, and the heart-wrenching path to redemption. A story that will pull you in from the very first moment and hold you tight until the very last tear falls. The bustling streets of downtown Chicago faded into a blur as Sarah Matthews sat in her parked car, her gaze fixed on the quaint coffee shop across the street. Her hands trembled as she clutched an old photograph, creased and worn from years of handling. In it, a young girl with pigtails and a toothless grin beamed at the camera, her eyes sparkling with innocence and joy. Sarah's vision blurred as tears welled up, a stark reminder of how much had changed. Inside the cafe, Emily Matthews, now 28, sat alone at a corner table. From afar, Sarah could see the toll the years had taken on her daughter. Emily's once vibrant red hair now hung limp and lackluster, her posture hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. There was something off about her appearance that Sarah couldn't quite place, a hollowness that seemed to radiate from within. As Sarah watched, her mind raced through a cascade of memories. Birthday parties, dance recitals, and lazy Sunday mornings filled with laughter and pancakes. How had they gone from those picture-perfect moments to this two strangers separated by more than just a pane of glass? The answer, of course, lay in the series of missteps and misunderstandings that had piled up over the years like a wall between them. The brutal divorce from Emily's father when Emily was just 15 had been the first major blow. Sarah, consumed by her own pain and the demands of suddenly being a single mother, had failed to see how deeply the family's fracture had affected her daughter. As Emily retreated into herself, Sarah had mistaken her silence for resilience. When Emily's grades began to slip, Sarah's frustration manifested as criticism rather than concern. Each interaction became a minefield, with both mother and daughter too hurt and too proud to extend an olive branch. Now, 7 years had passed since they'd last spoken face to face. 7 years of missed holidays, unshared milestones, and a growing chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. Yet here Sarah sat, drawn by an inexplicable urgency to reconnect with her only child. Taking a deep breath, Sarah steeled herself and stepped out of the car. The short walk to the cafe entrance felt like miles, each step heavy with the weight of past regrets and future uncertainties. As she reached for the door handle, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection. The lines around her eyes and mouth seemed deeper than ever, etched by years of worry and longing. The bell above the door chimed softly as Sarah entered, the aroma of freshly ground coffee enveloping her. Emily, engrossed in her phone, didn't look up. Sarah's heart raced as she approached, rehearsing the speech she'd practiced countless times in front of her bathroom mirror. "Emily?" Sarah's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Emily's head snapped up, her eyes widening in shock before narrowing with a mixture of emotions Sarah couldn't quite decipher. Was it anger, pain, or perhaps a flicker of the same longing Sarah felt? "Mom!" Emily's tone was flat, devoid of any warmth. "What are you doing here?" The carefully prepared words evaporated from Sarah's mind. She stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, overwhelmed by the reality of finally being face to face with her daughter after so long. I wanted to see you," Sarah finally managed, her voice cracking. "I've missed you so much, sweetheart." Emily's jaw clenched, her gaze hardening. "Really? You've had 7 years to pick up a phone, send an email, anything. Why now? The bitterness in Emily's voice cut through Sarah like a knife. She reached out instinctively, longing to brush a stray strand of hair from her daughter's face as she had done countless times when Emily was little. Emily flinched away from the touch, and Sarah's hand fell limply to her side. "I know I've made mistakes," Sarah began, fighting to keep her voice steady. "So many mistakes, but I want to make things right. Please, can we just talk?" For a moment, something flickered in Emily's eyes, a vulnerability that hinted at the little girl who used to run to her mother for comfort. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by a cold detachment that chilled Sarah to her core. "I don't know what you expect to accomplish here," Emily said, rising abruptly from her chair. "But I'm not interested in rehashing the past or playing happy families. I have a life now, one that doesn't include you. I think it's best if we keep it that way." With that, Emily grabbed her bag and brushed past Sarah, the bell above the door signaling her hasty exit. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, the weight of Emily's rejection crushing the air from her lungs. Around her, the cafe continued its normal rhythm, the hiss of the espresso machine, the low murmur of conversation, oblivious to the heart-wrenching scene that had just unfolded. Stumbling back to her car, Sarah's composure finally crumbled. She collapsed into the driver's seat, sobs racking her body as she clutched the old photograph to her chest. The smiling face of young Emily seemed to mock her now, a painful reminder of all she had lost. As the tears subsided, leaving Sarah feeling hollow and drained, a steely determination began to take root. She had failed Emily once before by giving up too easily, by allowing the distance between them to grow unchecked. She wouldn't make that mistake again. Wiping her eyes, Sarah started the car, her mind already racing with possibilities. She didn't know how, but she would find a way to bridge this chasm, to understand what had driven Emily so far away, and to prove that it was never too late for a mother's love to heal old wounds. What Sarah couldn't have known as she pulled away from the curb was that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would test her in ways she never imagined, forcing her to confront painful truths not just about her relationship with Emily, but about herself. And in the end, the revelations that awaited would leave not just Sarah and Emily, but everyone around them, forever changed. The rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in Sarah's living room seemed to mock her as she paced back and forth, replaying the disastrous encounter with Emily over and over in her mind. Each tick felt like another second slipping away, widening the gulf between mother and daughter. Sarah's eyes fell on the wall of family photos, a chronicle of happier times now tinged with melancholy. She paused at a picture of Emily's high school graduation, the last major event they'd attended together before everything fell apart. Even then, Sarah realized with a pang of regret, there had been signs of strain. Emily's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and the space between them in the photo spoke volumes. "How did I miss it?" Sarah muttered, tracing Emily's face in the frame. "What else have I been blind to?" Determined to unravel the mystery of her daughter's estrangement, Sarah grabbed her keys and headed out. Her first stop, Lakeside Park, where Emily had spent countless summer afternoons as a teenager. The park was alive with the sounds of children playing and dogs barking, but Sarah barely noticed as she made her way to Emily's favorite spot by the lake. She half expected, hoped, really, to find her daughter there, skipping stones across the water as she used to. Instead, Sarah found only memories and an empty bench. As she sat down, an elderly woman approached, walking a small terrier. "Excuse me," the woman said, squinting at Sarah. "You look familiar. Are you Emily's mother?" Sarah's heart leapt. Yes, I am. Do you know Emily?" The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Goldstein, nodded. "I've lived across from the park for years. Used to see Emily here all the time with her sketchbook. Such talent, that girl." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Sketchbook? I didn't know Emily drew." Mrs. Goldstein looked surprised. "Oh yes, she was quite passionate about it. Always said she wanted to be an artist someday." She paused, noting Sarah's confused expression. "But I haven't seen her here in ages. Is everything all right?" Sarah swallowed hard, realizing how much of her daughter's life had become a mystery to her. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "We've been out of touch for a while. I'm trying to reconnect." Mrs. Goldstein's eyes softened with understanding. "Well, if it helps, I did see Emily a few weeks ago. She was walking down Maple Street, looking a bit peaky. Poor thing actually fainted right there on the sidewalk. My grandson and I helped her up, but she insisted she was fine and hurried off." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "She fainted? Did she say why?" The older woman shook her head. "No, but she didn't look well at all. Much too thin and so pale. I wanted to call someone for her, but she was quite adamant about being left alone." Thanking Mrs. Goldstein, Sarah rushed back to her car, her mind reeling. Emily fainting in the street? Looking ill? A knot of fear tightened in her stomach as she realized how little she truly knew about her daughter's life and well-being. Without thinking, Sarah found herself driving to Emily's old apartment building. She knew Emily had moved, but perhaps a neighbor or the building manager might have some information. As she parked, Sarah's phone chimed with a text message. Her heart raced when she saw it was from Emily. "Stop digging, Mom. There are things you're better off not knowing." Sarah's hands shook as she stared at the cryptic message. What could Emily possibly be hiding that was so terrible? And how did she know Sarah was looking into her past? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, Sarah sat in her car, torn between respecting Emily's wishes and the overwhelming maternal instinct to protect her child, even if that child was now a grown woman who claimed not to need her. In that moment, Sarah made a decision. Whatever secrets Emily was keeping, whatever pain she was facing alone, Sarah was determined to uncover the truth. She would not lose her daughter again, not to silence, not to distance, and certainly not to whatever unknown threat seemed to be looming over Emily's life. With renewed purpose, Sarah started the car. She didn't know where this journey would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. She would not stop until she had answers, and until she found a way to bridge the chasm between them, no matter the cost. As she pulled away from the curb, Sarah failed to notice the figure watching from a nearby alley, a shadowy presence that had been trailing her all day, ensuring that the secrets of the past remained buried. For now. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital cast a sickly glow over Sarah's face as she stood outside Emily's room, her heart pounding in her chest. The events of the past 24 hours played through her mind like a surreal nightmare. The frantic phone calls, the desperate search, and finally, the gut-wrenching moment when she'd found Emily collapsed in her apartment. Now, as Sarah gathered the courage to enter the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to cross a threshold from which there was no return. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. Emily lay in the hospital bed, looking small and fragile against the stark white sheets. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. For a moment, Sarah was transported back in time, remembering a much younger Emily laid up with the flu, demanding stories and extra popsicles. "Mom!" Emily's voice, weak but tinged with surprise, snapped Sarah back to the present. "What are you doing here?" Sarah moved closer, fighting the urge to gather her daughter in her arms. "I've been worried sick, Emily. I've been trying to reach you for days. And when I found you..." Her voice trailed off, the memory of Emily unconscious on the floor still too raw. Emily's eyes darted away, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "You shouldn't have come," she muttered. "I told you to stop digging. And what was I supposed to do?" Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. "Ignore the fact that my daughter is clearly in trouble? Pretend I don't care. That never seemed to be a problem before." Emily shot back, a flicker of the old anger resurfacing. The words stung, but Sarah pressed on. "I know I've made mistakes, Emily, more than I can ever make up for. But please, I'm here now. Whatever's going on, we can face it together." For a long moment, Emily was silent, her gaze fixed on the window where the first hints of dawn were breaking. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "It's too late, Mom. There's nothing you can do." "What do you mean, too late?" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Emily, please just talk to me. What's going on? Emily closed her eyes, a single tear trailing down her cheek. When she opened them again, the look she gave Sarah was filled with a mixture of fear, resignation, and most heartbreakingly, a glimmer of the little girl who once believed her mother could fix anything. "I'm dying, Mom." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Sarah felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in denial. "No, that can't be right. There must be some mistake." Emily's laugh was hollow, devoid of any humor. "Trust me, I've wished it was a mistake for months now, but it's not. The doctors are sure." Sarah sank into the chair beside the bed, her mind reeling. "But how? What is it?" As Emily began to explain, detailing a rare, aggressive form of cancer that had gone undetected until it was too late, Sarah found herself struggling to process the information. How could her vibrant, stubborn, beautiful daughter be slipping away right before her eyes? "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah asked, her voice raw with emotion. "All this time, you've been dealing with this alone?" Emily's gaze softened slightly. "I didn't want you to see me like this, to remember me this way, and I guess part of me was still angry, still wanted to punish you for not being there before." The admission hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Oh, Emily," she breathed, reaching out to take her daughter's hand. This time, Emily didn't pull away. "I'm so sorry for everything, but please let me be here for you now. It's not too late for that." As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the window, mother and daughter sat in silence, both acutely aware of the precious time slipping away. Sarah's mind raced with 1,000 questions, 1,000 regrets, and a burning determination to make things right. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that Emily's revelation was just the tip of the iceberg. The coming days would unearth secrets and challenges that would test the limits of their fragile reconciliation, forcing both women to confront painful truths about their past and the uncertain future that lay ahead. As a nurse entered the room, breaking the moment, Sarah squeezed Emily's hand. "We're going to fight this," she said, her voice firm despite the tears threatening to spill over. "Together. I'm not going anywhere this time." Emily managed a small, tired smile. "Okay, Mom," she whispered. "Okay." The road ahead would be fraught with obstacles, emotional landmines, and heart-wrenching decisions. But in that moment, as the morning sun cast a warm glow over the room, a spark of hope flickered to life between them, fragile, but undeniably present. The antiseptic smell of the hospital had become all too familiar to Sarah over the past few weeks. She navigated the maze-like corridors with practiced ease, balancing a tray of coffee and a bag of fresh bagels, a small attempt at normalcy in their new, frightening reality. As she approached Emily's room, Sarah overheard raised voices. She paused outside the door, her heart racing as she recognized the sharp tone of Dr. Patel, Emily's oncologist. "Emily, you need to reconsider," Dr. Patel was saying, frustration evident in her voice. "The experimental treatment could buy you more time." "At what cost?" Emily's reply was weary but firm. "I've told you I'm done being a guinea pig. I want whatever time I have left to mean something." Sarah's hands trembled, nearly spilling the coffee. She'd known Emily was struggling with the grueling treatments, but hearing her daughter talk about the end with such finality sent a chill through her. Taking a deep breath, Sarah pushed open the door. Both Emily and Dr. Patel turned to look at her, an awkward silence falling over the room. "Am I interrupting?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice light. Emily's eyes met hers, a silent plea in them. "No, Mom. Dr. Patel was just leaving." The doctor sighed, gathering her charts. "Think about what I said, Emily. And Mrs. Matthews, if you could talk some sense into your daughter." As Dr. Patel left, Sarah set down the breakfast items and took a seat beside Emily's bed. "Want to tell me what that was about?" Emily picked at a loose thread on her blanket, avoiding Sarah's gaze. "It's nothing. Just more tests, more treatments. I'm tired, Mom. So tired." Sarah's heart ached at the defeat in her daughter's voice. Over the past weeks, they'd begun to rebuild their relationship, sharing stories and memories between hospital tests and treatments. But there were still moments when the years of distance between them felt insurmountable. "Sweetheart," Sarah began gently, "I know this is hard, but if there's a chance." "There isn't," Emily cut her off. "Not really. Best case scenario, I get a few more months of being sick and miserable." She finally looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't want that to be how you remember me, how I remember us." Sarah felt her own eyes well up. "Oh, Emily, I'll remember you as my beautiful, stubborn, amazing daughter, no matter what." A ghost of a smile flickered across Emily's face. "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything," Sarah assured her, squeezing her hand. They sat in companionable silence for a while, picking at the bagels. Sarah's mind raced, trying to find a way to help, to fix things as she'd always longed to do. "What if?" Sarah hesitated, an idea forming. "What if we got a second opinion? There's a renowned oncologist in New York, Dr. Harriet Chen. I could make some calls, see if she'd take your case." Emily sighed. "Mom, we've been through this. I don't want. Just hear me out," Sarah pleaded. "One consultation. That's all I'm asking. If Dr. Chen agrees with Dr. Patel, I promise I'll drop it. But please, Emily, let me do this for you." For a long moment, Emily was quiet, studying her mother's face. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, one consultation." Sarah felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly tempered by Emily's next words. "But Mom, you have to promise me something too. If this doesn't pan out, you'll support my decision, even if that means letting me go." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. The thought of losing Emily, of giving up, was unbearable. But as she looked into her daughter's eyes, she saw a strength and resolve that both broke her heart and filled her with pride. "I promise," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. What Sarah couldn't say, was that she had no intention of giving up. As Emily drifted off to sleep, exhausted from their conversation, Sarah slipped out of the room and pulled out her phone. "Hello, this is Sarah Matthews," she said quietly into the receiver. "I need to speak to Dr. Chen. It's urgent." As she began to explain Emily's case, Sarah was unaware of the chain of events she was setting in motion. Events that would push her to her limits, force her to confront painful truths about herself and her relationship with Emily, and ultimately present her with an impossible choice. For now, though, there was only the desperate hope of a mother determined to save her child, no matter the cost. The New York skyline loomed large outside the window of Dr. Harriet Chen's office, but Sarah barely noticed the impressive view. Her attention was wholly focused on the renowned oncologist sitting across from her, leafing through Emily's medical records with a furrowed brow. "Mrs. Matthews," Dr. Chen began, her voice measured, "I've reviewed your daughter's case thoroughly. I'm afraid I have to agree with Dr. Patel's assessment. Emily's condition is complex." Sarah's heart sank. She'd pinned so much hope on this consultation. "But surely there must be something we haven't tried? Some cutting-edge treatment." Dr. Chen leaned forward, her eyes kind but serious. "There is one possibility, but it's extremely risky. A new immunotherapy trial that's shown promise in cases similar to Emily's. However, the side effects can be severe, and given Emily's weakened state." Sarah clutched the arms of her chair, her mind racing. "But it could work. It could save her." "Potentially," Dr. Chen nodded. "But Mrs. Matthews, you need to understand." A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Chen's assistant poked her head in, looking flustered. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent call for Mrs. Matthews. He says it's about Emily." Sarah's blood ran cold. She'd left Emily back in Chicago with a trusted nurse for the day trip to New York. What could have happened? With shaking hands, Sarah took the phone. "Hello, Mrs. Matthews?" A vaguely familiar male voice came through the line. "This is Jake, Emily's friend? We met briefly at the hospital." Sarah vaguely recalled a lanky young man who'd visited Emily a few times. "Yes, Jake. What's wrong? Is Emily okay?" There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. Mrs. Matthews, there's something you need to know. About Emily, about why she got sick. It's not what you think. Sarah's confusion grew. What do you mean? Jake's voice was strained. I promised Emily I wouldn't say anything, but I can't keep quiet anymore. Not when she's dying. Jake, you're scaring me. Please, just tell me what's going on. It started 3 years ago, Jake began, his words tumbling out in a rush. Emily was in a bad place after the breakup with Tom. She started hanging out with this new crowd, people I didn't trust. There was this guy, Derek. As Jake continued, painting a picture of Emily's descent into a toxic relationship and dangerous lifestyle, Sarah felt the world tilting on its axis. She listened in horror as Jake described how Derek had isolated Emily from her friends, encouraged her to drop out of art school, and eventually introduced her to drugs. She tried to get clean, Mrs. Matthews, Jake's voice cracked. So many times. But Derek, he had a hold on her. And then, when she finally did break away, when she started to turn things around, that's when she got sick. Sarah's mind reeled, trying to reconcile this new information with the Emily she thought she knew. How could she have missed so much? How could her daughter have been suffering for so long without her knowing? Why are you telling me this now? Sarah managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake sighed heavily. Because Emily's giving up. She thinks she deserves this, that it's punishment for her mistakes. But it's not fair, Mrs. Matthews. She fought so hard to get her life back on track. She doesn't deserve to die for past mistakes. As Jake's words sank in, a terrible realization dawned on Sarah. All those years of distance, of misunderstanding. She hadn't just failed to be there for Emily. She'd been completely blind to her daughter's pain and struggles. Thank you, Jake, Sarah said, her voice hollow. I need to go. She handed the phone back to Dr. Chen's assistant, her mind in turmoil. The doctor was looking at her with concern. Mrs. Matthews? Are you all right? Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself. Dr. Chen, I need to know everything about that immunotherapy trial. Every risk, every potential outcome. My daughter's life depends on it. As Dr. Chen began to outline the treatment, Sarah's determination solidified. She had failed Emily once by not seeing her pain, by not being there when she needed her most. She wouldn't fail her again. What Sarah didn't realize was that this revelation was just the beginning. The road ahead would force her to confront not just Emily's past, but her own role in their estrangement. And the choices she would face would test the very limits of a mother's love. Outside the office window, storm clouds began to gather over the New York skyline, mirroring the tumult in Sarah's heart as she prepared to fight for her daughter's life and perhaps, for the first time, truly understand her. The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment filled the hospital room, a constant reminder of the precarious balance between life and death. Sarah sat vigil by Emily's bedside, her daughter's hand clasped tightly in her own. The past week had been a whirlwind of difficult conversations, tears, and ultimately, a decision that weighed heavily on both their hearts. Mom! Emily's voice was weak, barely above a whisper. Are you sure about this? Sarah squeezed her hand gently. I'm sure if you are, sweetheart. We're in this together, remember? Emily managed a small smile, though fear lingered in her eyes. I'm scared, she admitted, her vulnerability a stark contrast to the walls she'd maintained for so long. I know, baby. I am too, Sarah confessed, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's forehead. But we've got to try. You've fought so hard already. We can't give up now. The decision to pursue the experimental immunotherapy treatment hadn't come easily. After Jake's revelation, Sarah had returned to Chicago, her heart heavy with the weight of all she'd missed in her daughter's life. The ensuing conversation with Emily had been raw, painful, and ultimately cathartic. Emily had broken down, finally sharing the full extent of her struggles, the abusive relationship, the spiral into addiction, and the crushing guilt she'd carried even after getting clean. Sarah listened, her own tears falling freely as she realized how much pain her daughter had endured alone. I thought you'd be so disappointed in me, Emily had sobbed. I couldn't bear to see that look in your eyes. Sarah had gathered Emily in her arms then, holding her close for the first time in years. Oh, my sweet girl, I could never be disappointed in you. I'm so proud of how strong you've been, how hard you've fought. I'm just sorry I wasn't there to fight alongside you. That moment of reconnection had been the turning point. Together, they decided to take the risk on the new treatment, understanding the potential consequences but clinging to the hope it offered. Now, as the nurses prepared Emily for the first round of treatment, that hope felt fragile but precious. Mrs. Matthews? Dr. Chun appeared in the doorway. It's time. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. She leaned down, pressing a kiss to Emily's forehead. I'll be right here when you wake up. Okay? I love you so much. I love you too, Mom, Emily whispered, a single tear sliding down her cheek. As they wheeled Emily away, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Jake, his face etched with concern. How are you holding up? He asked gently. Sarah took a shaky breath. I'm terrified, she admitted, but I'm trying to be strong for her. Jake nodded in understanding. She's lucky to have you fighting for her. A rueful smile crossed Sarah's face. I just wish I'd started fighting sooner. As they settled into the waiting room, Sarah found herself opening up to Jake, sharing stories of Emily's childhood and her own regrets about the years they'd lost. Jake, in turn, filled in more details about Emily's recent past, her struggles. Yes, but also her triumphs, her kindness, her resilience. Hours ticked by, each minute feeling like an eternity. When Dr. Chun finally emerged, her expression was guarded. The initial treatment went as well as we could hope, she explained, but the next 48 hours will be critical. Emily's body has been through a lot, and there's a risk of severe side effects. Sarah nodded, steeling herself. Can I see her? Dr. Chun led them to the ICU, where Emily lay surrounded by even more machines than before. She looked small and fragile, her skin almost translucent under the harsh hospital lights. Sarah took her place by Emily's side once more, gently taking her hand. I'm here, sweetheart, she murmured. I'm not going anywhere. As night fell, Sarah maintained her vigil. She spoke softly to Emily, reminiscing about happier times and making promises for the future. She apologized for the years of misunderstanding, for not seeing Emily's pain, for letting the distance between them grow. But we're going to fix this, Sarah vowed, her voice thick with emotion. You're going to get better, and we'll have all the time in the world to make new memories, to be a family again. In the quiet of the ICU, Sarah allowed herself to imagine that future holidays spent together, long talks over coffee, maybe even Emily pursuing her art again. The possibility felt both tantalizingly close and agonizingly far. As dawn broke, casting a soft glow through the hospital windows, Emily's monitors began to beep erratically. Sarah's heart leapt into her throat as nurses rushed in, Dr. Chun close behind. What's happening? Sarah cried, being gently but firmly moved aside. Dr. Chen's expression was grim. Emily's body is rejecting the treatment. We need to act fast. In that moment, as chaos erupted around her, Sarah felt a surge of determination unlike anything she'd ever known. She'd already lost so much time with Emily. She refused to lose her daughter now. Do whatever it takes, Sarah told Dr. Chun, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. Whatever it takes to save my baby. As the medical team worked frantically to stabilize Emily, Sarah closed her eyes and prayed, not just for Emily's survival, but for the chance to truly know her daughter, to make up for lost time, to be the mother she should have been all along. Little did Sarah know, the greatest test of her love and resolve was yet to come. The journey ahead would push her to limits she never imagined, forcing her to confront not just Emily's past, but her own deepest fears and regrets. The steady hum of hospital machinery had become a haunting lullaby for Sarah over the past week. She barely left Emily's side, watching anxiously for any sign of improvement as her daughter battled the aftermath of the experimental treatment. The initial crisis had passed, but Emily remained in a medically induced coma, her body too weak to fight on its own. It was during one of Sarah's rare breaks, while she was grabbing a quick coffee in the hospital cafeteria, that everything changed once again. "Mrs. Matthews?" A gentle voice broke through her exhausted haze. Sarah looked up to see Dr. Chun, her expression unreadable. "Is it Emily? Has something happened?" Sarah's heart raced, fearing the worst. Dr. Chun shook her head, taking a seat across from Sarah. "Emily's condition is stable for now, but there's something we need to discuss." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "We've received some unexpected test results." Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion. "What kind of results?" "Mrs. Matthews, are you aware that Emily was pregnant?" The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Pregnant?" Sarah repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. That's not possible. She would have told me." Dr. Chen's expression softened. "I'm afraid it is possible. Emily was in the early stages of pregnancy when she began treatment. Given the aggressive nature of both her illness and the therapy, we didn't catch it initially." Sarah's mind reeled, trying to process this new information. "But what does this mean? For Emily? For the—" She couldn't bring herself to say baby. "That's what we need to discuss," Dr. Chun said gently. "The treatment has put enormous stress on Emily's body. Continuing the pregnancy could jeopardize her already fragile health. But terminating the pregnancy also carries risks in her current state." Sarah felt as though she'd been plunged into icy water. "Are you saying I have to choose?" she asked, her voice cracking. Dr. Chun nodded solemnly. "As Emily's medical proxy, the decision falls to you. We need to act quickly, one way or the other, to give Emily the best chance of recovery." Sarah's head spun. How could she possibly make this choice? How could she decide between her daughter's life and that of her unborn grandchild? And how could Emily have kept this secret, even as she faced her own mortality? As if reading her thoughts, Dr. Chun spoke again. "There's something else you should know. We found a letter among Emily's personal effects. It's addressed to you." With trembling hands, Sarah accepted the envelope Dr. Chun produced. She recognized Emily's handwriting immediately, the once neat script now shaky and uneven. "I'll give you some time," Dr. Chun said softly, rising from the table. "But Mrs. Matthews will need a decision soon." Alone once more, Sarah stared at the letter, afraid of what truths it might contain. Finally, gathering her courage, she opened it and began to read. "Mom, if you're reading this, I guess things didn't go as we hoped. I'm sorry. There's so much I wanted to tell you, so much I should have said before. But I was scared and ashamed, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap between us. I found out I was pregnant just before I got sick. At first, I was terrified. After everything I've been through, how could I possibly be a mother? But then I thought of you, of how you always tried your best, even when things were hard. And I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could do this. I wanted to tell you. I planned to once I got better. I dreamed of us shopping for baby clothes together, of you teaching me all the things I'd need to know. I imagined you as a grandmother, and for the first time in years, I felt hope. But now, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'll make it or if this baby will. But Mom, I need you to know that whatever happens, I love you. I understand now how hard it must have been for you, raising me on your own. I'm sorry for the years we lost, for pushing you away when I needed you most. If I don't make it, please don't blame yourself. And if there's any chance at all, for this baby, please give it that chance. Let it know how much its mother loved it, even if we never got to meet. I love you, Mom. I hope you can forgive me. Emily." Sarah's tears fell freely, blurring the words on the page. The weight of Emily's confession, her hopes and fears, pressed down on Sarah's heart. She thought of all the moments they'd missed, of the future Emily had imagined, a future that now hung by the thinnest of threads. As dawn broke outside the hospital windows, Sarah made her way back to Emily's room, the letter clutched tightly in her hand. She looked at her daughter's pale face, seeing for the first time the subtle changes that hinted at new life growing within her. "Oh, Emily," Sarah whispered, gently touching her daughter's cheek. "What am I supposed to do?" The machines beeped steadily, offering no answers. Sarah knew that whatever choice she made, it would change their lives forever. She closed her eyes, searching for guidance, for the strength to make an impossible decision. As she sat there, caught between hope and heartbreak, Sarah couldn't have known that the true test of her love and resolve was yet to come. The path ahead would challenge everything she thought she knew about motherhood, about sacrifice, and about the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. The warm glow of sunset filtered through the park trees, casting long shadows across the playground. Sarah Matthews sat on a bench, her eyes fixed on a group of children laughing as they chased each other around the jungle gym. A bittersweet smile played on her lips as she watched their carefree antics. 5 years had passed since that fateful day in the hospital when Sarah had made the most difficult decision of her life. The weight of that choice still sat heavy on her heart, but as she watched the children play, she felt a glimmer of the peace she'd been searching for. "Grandma, watch me," a small voice called out, drawing Sarah's attention to the slide. There, poised at the top with a look of determination, was 4-year-old Lily. Her curly red hair, so like Emily's, caught the fading sunlight, creating a halo effect around her head. Sarah's heart swelled with love and a tinge of sadness. "I'm watching, sweetheart. You can do it." As Lily slid down with a squeal of delight, Sarah's mind drifted back to those tense days in the hospital. She had agonized over Emily's letter, torn between honoring her daughter's wishes and protecting her fragile health. In the end, with the support of Dr. Chun and a team of specialists, they had found a way to do both, though not without great risk. The months that followed had been a roller coaster of emotions. Emily had slowly regained consciousness, her body weakened but fighting. When Sarah had told her about the pregnancy and the decision to continue it, Emily had wept with a mixture of joy and fear. "You're the bravest person I know," Sarah had told her daughter, holding her close. "We're going to get through this together." And they had, though the journey was far from easy. Emily's health remained precarious throughout the pregnancy, requiring constant monitoring and care. Sarah had practically moved into the hospital, determined to be there for every moment, to make up for all the time they had lost. As Emily's due date approached, the tension had been palpable. The doctors warned that the delivery could put too much strain on Emily's weakened body. But Emily, with a strength that left Sarah in awe, had insisted on seeing it through. "This baby is my second chance," Emily had said, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Our second chance. To be the family we should have been all along." Lily's birth had been both miraculous and heartbreaking. The joy of holding her granddaughter for the first time had been tempered by the knowledge that Emily's condition was deteriorating rapidly. In those final days, as Emily's strength ebbed, Sarah had witnessed a love so pure and selfless that it took her breath away. "Promise me you'll tell her everything," Emily had whispered, cradling Lily in her arms. "About her mom, about our mistakes, about how we found our way back to each other. Let her know how much she was wanted, how much she was loved." Sarah had promised, her voice choked with tears, and she had kept that promise every day since. "Grandma, did you see? I went all the way down by myself." Lily's excited voice pulled Sarah back to the present. The little girl climbed onto the bench, snuggling into Sarah's side. "I saw, sweetheart. You were so brave." Sarah wrapped an arm around her granddaughter, marveling at how much she looked like Emily. "Just like your mommy." Lily looked up, her green eyes, Emily's eyes wide with curiosity. "Can you tell me a story about mommy? Please." Sarah smiled, her heart full. This was their ritual, these stories of Emily, of her strength, her struggles, her love. "Of course, my darling. What would you like to hear?" As Sarah began to recount one of Emily's childhood adventures, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The pain of loss would always be there, but so too would the love that had blossomed in those final months with Emily. A love that lived on in Lily, in the stories they shared, in the lessons learned. Sarah knew that the road ahead would not always be easy. There would be questions to answer, challenges to face as Lily grew. But she was ready for them, armed with the wisdom hard-won through her journey with Emily. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in a soft twilight, Sarah hugged Lily close. In that moment, she felt Emily's presence, as strong and real as if she were sitting right beside them. "We did it, Emily," Sarah whispered to the fading light. "We became the family we were meant to be, and your love, your legacy, it lives on in her, in us." Lily looked up, sensing the emotion in her grandmother's voice. "I love you, Grandma," she said simply, wrapping her small arms around Sarah's waist. Sarah's eyes filled with tears of both joy and sorrow. "I love you too, my sweet girl, so very much." As they gathered their things to head home, Sarah took one last look around the park. The playground was emptying, families heading home for the night. But in the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves, in the last rays of sunlight painting the sky, Sarah felt a profound sense of connection to Emily, to Lily, to the unbreakable bonds of love that had brought them to this moment. With Lily's hand in hers, Sarah began the walk home, her heart full of gratitude for the second chances life had given them all. The journey had been long and painful, but as she looked down at her granddaughter's smiling face, Sarah knew that every step had been worth it. For in Lily's eyes, in her laughter, in the love they shared, Emily's spirit lived on. And in that continuation of love, Sarah had found her own redemption. Thank you very much for listening to this story. Comment below what you thought of the ending and from which city you're listening to us. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, click on the next story that's appearing on your screen now. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a huge community that shares inspiring stories together. See you soon.